Yet another very important discussion to make is Jammu and Kashmir, because without Jammu and Kashmir we cannot talk about India and Pakistan, because it is so intrinsically connected, and we are not going to get away with this in the near future also. So I would like to talk about a bit of a very brief history of Jammu and Kashmir and the war of 1947, the first war between India and Pakistan. So the history of J&K and the 1947-48 war. That is the first war between India and Pakistan. So that is the context in which I would like to discuss. That is a small one about the Jammu and Kashmir. So it is the Jammu and Kashmir is the northernmost state of India, and as you know very well, at the time of partition, a Muslim majority state, a princely state, but ruled by a Hindu king. So, but Jammu and Kashmir came into being as a single political entity in 1846. Please note, this Jammu and Kashmir, it has a very long history. Single political entity 1846 under the Treaty of Amritsar. Under the Treaty of Amritsar, it is signed between Raja Gulab Singh and the British Indian government. That was in March 1846, and British India, Raja Gulab Singh and British India in March 1846. So that is when that is how the Jammu and Kashmir as a state came into being. And during the time of partition or during the time of independence of India, Maharaja Hari Singh. So in 1947 it was Maharaja Hari Singh who was in command, and ultimately, he decided, in fact at the time of partition, these princely states were given the freedom either to join India or Pakistan. And since the location, the geography of Jammu and Kashmir was such, and even Jammu and Kashmir was never under the direct control of the Britishers, so it was definitely under the overall supervision of the Britishers, but Jammu and Kashmir was an independent state since 1846. There was definitely a long history of independence for them. They cherished that an independent Jammu and Kashmir. So that is why Maharaja Hari Singh did not join either India or Pakistan in the beginning, and he opened negotiations with both, and he might have been thinking that let me delay this process, and by delaying this there can be, or Britishers will go, and both India and Pakistan will settle down, and slowly maybe Jammu and Kashmir can declare independence. That might have been his thinking. So he did not, he did not sign an agreement to join either India or Pakistan. Rather, in the beginning, pending a final decision, he even signed a standstill agreement with Pakistan. Standstill agreement with Pakistan. He signed a standstill agreement saying that the way it is, let it stand still, and he did not indicate what will happen finally. But what happened was that when he continued this standstill agreement, the Pakistanis got or we can say they lost patience. So what they felt was that by October, see August independence 1947, August 1947 independence, and by October 1947, Pakistani leadership, they lost patience. They started fearing that this standstill agreement and the way Maharaja is proceeding is to, they started fearing that the Jammu and Kashmir is going to join Indian Union, or it may accede to Indian Union. And because of that fear, Pakistan, they revolt in Jammu and Kashmir, especially by the tribals, and actively supported by Pashtuns, were organized in October. So there was a major revolt against Maharaja Hari Singh by the tribal dominated areas of the west, and actively supported by the Pashtuns from the northwest frontier province. So, literally we can say these revolt and the attack on Jammu and Kashmir started on 22nd October 1947. So, within 2 months of independence of India, within 2 months of Jammu and Kashmir not deciding where will they join or what will they do, Pakistan lost patience and the revolt against Maharaja started on 22nd of October, and naturally Maharaja within a few days, or rather within 4 days, within 5 days, the troop, or rather these revolt, the tribals and actively supported by Pakistan, they reached within say 20 kilometers of Srinagar. Within 20 kilometers of Srinagar. So at that stage, Maharaja realized that if he did not do anything, or he is not able to, initially the fight is between the Maharaja's forces and the tribals, and they were actively supported by Pakistani troops. So naturally they were advancing very fast, he had no choice. So on 26th of October, within a few days, 1947, Maharaja agreed to sign the instrument of, or signed the instrument of accession, and by 27th of October it was ratified, or the Lord Mountbatten also approved it, and India agreed to airlift troops to Srinagar, because there is no time to send troops on a normal route. So Indian troops were airlifted to Srinagar on 27th, immediately after after signing of the instrument of accession. So there hardly any time for Indian leaders and the Kashmiri leaders to negotiate. Just 4 days of the war and we signed the agreement. And naturally, in our eagerness to get this territory, and Maharaja was thinking about independence. So he wanted maximum autonomy, and in this instrument of accession only 3 items, or some say 4 items. So what is defense? Then foreign affairs, communication, and the 4th item, if at all, is currency. So these were the 4 items conceded to the Indian Union, and the rest we agreed, both Indian and the Kashmiri leaders, or the Maharaja Hari Singh and the negotiators agreed that this will be left to the Constituent Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir to decide. So we agreed for maximum autonomy at that time, and in return Jammu and Kashmir signed Indian accession to Indian. See, in fact, without signing the accession to Indian Union, Maharaja wanted Indian troops to be there. But Nehru refused it by saying that we will not fight for somebody else. I mean, if that is a part of our territory, we can come and support you. So he had no choice other than agreeing for it. Then we approached the UN also, and finally the UN ceasefire line of on 1st January 1949, the UN ceasefire line. So the war was approved. So the war was between 22nd October to 5th January 1949. So if you strictly say the war is between 22nd October 1947 to 5th Jan 1949. So it was there for more than 1 year and 2 months. Technically, the war was there for 1 year and 2 months. And finally, the UN ceasefire line of 1949, and subsequently this ceasefire line was been renamed as Line of Control after the Shimla Agreement of 1972. So this has been renamed the UN ceasefire line has been renamed as Line of Control, LOC, in the 1972 Shimla Agreement. So, that is how the war ended. So, it has continued. So, the war was initially fought by the Jammu and Kashmir state forces and the tribal militia, that is what they say, and then followed the accession to Indian Union. Indian troops reached on 27th onwards. Indian troops were airlifted to Srinagar. Then initially the British commanding officers, because both Indian army and Pakistani army were controlled and commanded by the British officers, they refused entry for Pakistani troops. Initially, for supporting this, the tribal uprising, the Pakistani army were not allowed, but subsequently they allowed. And by 1948 or by mid 1948, Pakistani troops were actively involved in the fight, and a line of control slowly evolved, and a ceasefire as on 31st December 1948, and it came into force, we can say, 1st Jan 1949 came into effect, and a ceasefire line came into effect, and that ceasefire line is today we call it as the line of control. So, the result of the war is inconclusive, because Pakistani troops were trying to capture, see, they could capture only the less inhabited or the difficult terrain. 1/3 of Jammu and Kashmir, we can say it is in the hands of Pakistan, but definitely it was a major victory for India, because our Indian troops were airlifted in the last moment. Even after that, we could fight it out. We could hold on to 2/3 of the territory, and most of the populous areas, the populated areas, came under India. So, even though the war was inconclusive, most neutral experts agree that India was the victor in the war. Okay, even though the war was inconclusive, the war was inconclusive, but most neutral experts accept and agree that India definitely had an upper hand. We can see, if you had to award and decide a victor, then definitely India was the victor, because we successfully defended 2/3 of the Kashmir, including Kashmir Valley, Jammu, Ladakh, everything, and most of the populated regions came to Indian side. So, that is how it was there. So, and we went to UN, definitely we went to, Nehru was keen to go into UN, because Nehru pursued an idealistic foreign policy, and he wanted to use the diplomatic means, and we wanted to use the good offices of the UN, which is recently created, and India was one of the original signatories of the UN. So, we wanted diplomatic means to be followed. So, that is how we approached the UN, and I will talk about the UN and the various issues there in a subsequent video. So, that is how ultimately, when the line of control divided, 1/3 of Jammu and Kashmir went into the hands of Pakistan, and 2/3 came into Indian side, and that is how the line of control was finally settled. So, what is occupied by Pakistan, we call it as Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and what is left with India is the Indian Kashmir, what we speak. So, that is the situation of the 19th. So, the war ended in a stalemate, we can say. A ceasefire line or a ceasefire was declared or came into force on 1st January 1949, and 2/3 of the Jammu and Kashmir, with most of the populated territories, came into the Indian hands. 1/3 of Jammu and Kashmir, with less population and more difficult terrains, went into the hands of Pakistan, and that is how the and that led to finally what called line of control. Line of control, this name was given in the Shimla Agreement of 1972. So, that is all about the history of Jammu and Kashmir.